The morning sun rose over the remote SEAL base, casting long shadows across the concrete runways and camouflaged barracks. Lieutenant Rachel Lawson stepped off the transport helicopter, her boots hitting the ground with a quiet but confident thud. The hum of activity surrounded her. Soldiers moving quickly, some running drills, others checking equipment. But she moved with a calm, deliberate pace, as if she belonged to a different rhythm altogether. There was something about her that drew attention without her even trying. A quiet confidence, a sense of discipline, and an intensity in her eyes that hinted at experience far beyond her years. Rachel had been through rigorous training before, though most of it was classified. She wasn't just another officer reporting for duty. She was someone who had survived the harshest conditions, someone whose skill with a sniper rifle had already made waves in classified operations. But here, at this base, among the legendary SEALs who had seen it all, she had to start fresh. No one knew her story, no one had seen her in action, and that suited her perfectly. She wasn't here to impress anyone with words. Her record and reputation were irrelevant until proven in the field. As she walked toward the main compound, she noticed the curious glances of the other soldiers. Whispers floated through the air. Some were surprised to see a woman at this level of training. Others were simply intrigued by the aura she carried. But Rachel didn't let it bother her. She had learned long ago that distractions, especially judgments from others, were wasted energy. Every step she took was purposeful, every movement calculated. Her uniform was crisp, her weapons perfectly maintained, and her demeanor calm, almost serene, in contrast to the energy buzzing around the base. Commander Harris, a veteran of countless operations and a man who had seen some of the most extraordinary soldiers in the world, noticed her almost immediately. He had a habit of scanning new arrivals carefully, looking for any sign of skill, arrogance, or weakness. When his eyes landed on Rachel, he saw none of the usual signs of nervousness or overconfidence. Instead, he saw someone who carried herself like she had already been through the trials that most soldiers only read about. There was a precision to her movements, a stillness that seemed unnatural in such a chaotic environment, and it made him curious. Rachel made her way to the armory, the place she knew she would feel most at home. Rows of weapons glinted under the bright lights, each carefully stored, each meticulously maintained. She moved past them like a dancer moving through a familiar stage, her hands brushing lightly over the stock of rifles. Rifles she had handled before, weapons that demanded respect and understanding. She paused in front of a Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle, its massive barrel gleaming under the lights. She knelt down, removed her gloves, and began to clean it with slow, precise movements. Every stroke of the cloth was measured, every check of the scope intentional. This was not just cleaning. It was ritual. It was how she prepared her mind for what came next. Other soldiers began to notice her. A few exchanged skeptical glances, muttering under their breath. "Who's she?" one asked. "Looks like she's trying too hard," another whispered. Some of them assumed she was a novice, trying to show off by handling such a powerful weapon. But Rachel paid no attention. Her focus was absolute. The rifle in her hands wasn't just a tool. It was an extension of herself, and she treated it with the respect and care it deserved. Time seemed to slow around her as she worked. Commander Harris observed from a distance, intrigued but not yet impressed. There was something different about this officer, something beyond technique or strength. She had a presence that demanded attention without making a sound, a quiet authority that seemed to pull the eyes of everyone nearby. But he reminded himself that presence alone didn't mean skill. Many had looked confident and failed spectacularly when it came to real challenges. Rachel finally finished cleaning the Barrett, placing it carefully back on the rack. She stood, dusted off her uniform, and looked around the room. The other soldiers were watching her now, curiosity mixed with a hint of respect, though none of them could fully explain why. She didn't speak a word, didn't seek approval. She simply moved with calm purpose, ready for the day's training exercises, ready to prove herself not through words or gestures but through action. Her arrival at the base marked the beginning of something remarkable. While others saw a quiet, disciplined officer polishing her rifle, few could imagine the record-breaking skills she carried. the experience honed through countless operations in the most extreme conditions. This was just the start, and already the base felt different. The presence of someone like Rachel had a subtle but undeniable impact, an energy that made even the most seasoned soldiers take notice, and made Commander Harris wonder just how extraordinary this young sniper might truly be. The morning routines at the SEAL base were in full swing. Soldiers moved with military precision, each one following strict schedules and protocols. Some ran drills across the open training grounds, their boots pounding the concrete, while others inspected weapons, checked gear, or reviewed tactical maps. Commander Harris walked among them, observing quietly, his sharp eyes scanning for anything unusual. It was during this usual inspection that he first noticed Lieutenant Rachel Lawson again. She was kneeling on the floor of the armory, her focus absolute. In front of her lay the Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle, its metallic surface gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Rachel's hands moved with practiced precision, wiping down each part of the massive weapon, checking the scope, and carefully oiling the mechanisms. To any casual observer, it might have looked like routine cleaning, but for those who knew what to look for, it was something more. Her every movement suggested deep familiarity and respect for the weapon, as if it were an extension of her own body. Commander Harris leaned against a wall nearby, arms crossed, watching silently. He had seen plenty of soldiers polish rifles, but few did it with this level of care. Most treated cleaning as a chore, something to tick off their checklist. Rachel approached it differently. Her motions were deliberate and almost ritualistic. She wasn't just cleaning the rifle. She was communicating with it, preparing for a connection that went far beyond the physical act. Every stroke of the cloth, every adjustment of the scope, every tiny turn of the screw seemed to be a meditation, a preparation for precision that few could comprehend. Other soldiers began to notice her too. Whispers floated around the armory. "Who's she?" asked one of the younger recruits. "I've never seen anyone spend this much time cleaning a rifle," said another. Some smirked, assuming she was overcompensating, trying to make herself look important. A few veterans, however, narrowed their eyes and leaned in subtly, sensing there might be more to her than met the eye. It was as if they could feel her confidence radiating, though it was quiet, calm, and almost unassuming. She didn't boast or seek attention, and that made her presence even more intriguing. Commander Harris finally stepped closer, curious but cautious. "Lieutenant Lawson, attention to detail is good," he said, his voice carrying authority. Rachel looked up briefly, meeting his gaze with the calm, steady eyes of someone who had faced far greater challenges than a base inspection. "Yes, sir," she replied, her tone neutral but polite. There was no arrogance, no hint of superiority, just professionalism and focus. Harris noted that immediately. Many newcomers would either act nervous or try to impress, but Rachel displayed neither. As she continued, Harris observed the subtle techniques she used while cleaning the rifle. She adjusted the scope with meticulous care, checked the barrel for the slightest imperfection, and made precise, small movements that suggested extensive experience. There was something almost hypnotic about the way she worked, and Harris felt a rare sense of curiosity mixed with respect. He realized that this wasn't just about a rifle. This was about a soldier preparing herself for challenges that very few could imagine. Meanwhile, the surrounding soldiers continued to whisper. Some were skeptical, thinking she was trying to prove herself unnecessarily. "Why does she spend so much time on it?" one muttered. "It's just a rifle," another added. But others began to notice small details. How her movements were fluid, how her posture was perfect, and how even the slightest misalignment was corrected immediately. There was an efficiency in her actions, a skill born from experience, and slowly, some of the doubters began to feel a flicker of respect. Rachel finally stood, placing the Barrett .50 carefully back on its rack. She didn't rush, didn't look around for approval, and didn't make a show of finishing. She simply stood, dusted her hands, and straightened her uniform. To her, this was a task completed correctly, nothing more. But for those watching, including Commander Harris, it was a revelation. Here was a soldier who combined discipline, patience, and technical skill in a way that suggested she was not just competent. She was exceptional. Harris approached her, walking slowly, analyzing every aspect of her behavior. "Lieutenant, I've seen many handle rifles before," he said, his tone even but carrying the weight of experience. "Few approach it the way you do. I'm intrigued." Rachel gave a small, respectful nod, her expression neutral. There was no attempt to impress him with words, no exaggeration of her abilities. Harris realized that whatever she had accomplished before, it was grounded in genuine skill, not ego. By the time morning drills began, Rachel had already left a subtle but powerful impression on the base. Soldiers who had initially whispered skeptically now watched her quietly, some with curiosity, some with cautious respect. Commander Harris returned to his rounds, but his mind lingered on her. Something about Lieutenant Lawson didn't fit the usual pattern of new arrivals. He didn't yet know the full story, but he could sense that she was someone who could surpass expectations, someone capable of achieving feats most would consider impossible. And so, the first real impressions were made. Rachel Lawson, quietly polishing a rifle in the armory, had captured attention without saying a single boastful word. In a place filled with the best of the best, she had already begun to stand out, not because of noise or showmanship, but because of skill, discipline, and a presence that commanded attention in the subtlest way possible. The seeds of respect and curiosity had been planted, setting the stage for the remarkable events that were about to unfold. The day moved forward quickly at the SEAL base, and the tension in the air was almost tangible. Lieutenant Rachel Lawson had already made her quiet impression on the other soldiers, but the real test was coming. Today was the start of the long-range sniping exercise, a challenge designed to push even the most experienced snipers to their limits. Distances that most soldiers only practiced in theory would now become real, tangible obstacles. Commander Harris had announced the exercise earlier, and while the veterans nodded confidently, Rachel felt a familiar calm settle over her. She had faced impossible distances before, but what made this challenge different was the unknown element. The elite SEALs who would also participate. The soldiers gathered on the training grounds, rifles slung over their shoulders, scopes checked, and minds focused. There was a murmur of excitement and a little tension. Many had heard of Rachel cleaning her Barrett .50 earlier, but whispers turned quickly into skepticism. "She's just another officer showing off," said one of the junior soldiers. "There's no way she can handle this distance," muttered another. Even some of the veterans exchanged cautious looks. They had seen rookies with confidence collapse under pressure, and many assumed Rachel would be the same. Commander Harris stood at the front, overseeing the preparations. His gaze swept across the group, lingering briefly on Rachel. He wasn't sure what to expect from her. She had impressed him with her discipline in the armory, yes, but this was different. Handling a rifle at extreme range required far more than care. It required instinct, calculation, and nerves of steel. He didn't doubt that Rachel had experience, but experience at a secret level didn't always translate in training exercises. Today, she would either prove herself, or she would be quietly forgotten like so many before her. Rachel moved calmly to her firing point, choosing a spot that gave her a clear line of sight across the sprawling field. The SEALs around her muttered quietly, some skeptical, some curious. She unpacked her Barrett .50, checked the barrel, aligned the scope, and began calculating variables in her head. Wind direction, humidity, temperature, even the subtle curvature of the earth over extreme distances, all of these factors were considered in seconds. For most of the soldiers, these calculations would be overwhelming, and panic could easily set in. For Rachel, it was familiar territory. The first round of shots was fired by the other soldiers. Bullets whistled across the field, some landing impressively close to their targets, others falling short. There were murmurs of approval and occasional groans of frustration. Commander Harris noted the performance, recognizing the skill but also the nervous tension in the shooters. Then it was Rachel's turn. She adjusted her rifle, checking the scope one last time. Her breathing slowed, almost imperceptibly, and she exhaled lightly before squeezing the trigger. The rifle roared, sending the bullet across the vast distance. For a moment, everyone held their breath, eyes tracking the impact. Then came the sound that made jaws drop, a perfect hit right on target at a distance so far that many had thought it impossible under these conditions. The whispers turned into stunned silence. Commander Harris's eyes widened as he processed what he had just seen. This was no ordinary shot. It was a demonstration of precision, skill, and calm under pressure that was almost otherworldly. Rachel didn't react. She didn't celebrate or look around to seek approval. She simply prepared for the next shot. Each movement was deliberate, almost mechanical in its precision. The other soldiers watched, some in awe, some in disbelief. It was clear that she wasn't relying on luck. This was skill honed through countless hours of practice and experience that few at the base could even imagine. As the exercise continued, Rachel continued to hit targets that seemed impossible to reach. Each shot reinforced what everyone had begun to realize. She was extraordinary. Commander Harris walked closer, observing the calculations she made in her head, the adjustments she applied to the scope, and the calm patience that allowed her to succeed where others faltered. He could feel the tension in the air shift. The same soldiers who had doubted her moments earlier now watched silently, their respect growing with every perfect hit. By the end of the exercise, the results were undeniable. Rachel had not only met the challenge, she had redefined it. Her accuracy and control had surpassed the expectations of even the most experienced SEALs. Commander Harris approached her, his expression a mixture of curiosity, admiration, and disbelief. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice steady but with an edge of excitement. "That was exceptional. I've seen a lot of snipers in my career, but very few can match what you just demonstrated." Rachel nodded quietly, offering a polite "Thank you, sir." But she didn't boast or exaggerate. To her, this was simply part of the job, the expectation of a professional who treated her craft with the respect and discipline it deserved. She had proven herself not through words, not through pride, but through undeniable skill and patience under pressure. The whispers among the soldiers turned into conversations of respect. Veterans nodded to her as she packed up her rifle, and younger recruits whispered excitedly about what they had just witnessed. Rachel had earned more than acknowledgement. She had earned respect. She had taken the skepticism of her peers and turned it into admiration, all without speaking more than a few polite words. For Commander Harris, the lesson was clear. Rachel Lawson was not here to impress with talk or bravado. She was here to demonstrate what true skill looked like. And in the quiet aftermath of the exercise, as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, he couldn't help but think, this officer had the potential to achieve feats that would be remembered for years, perhaps decades. He had seen her polish a rifle with meticulous care, and now he had witnessed her prove that every small movement, every careful calculation, had prepared her for moments like this, moments that few could ever hope to master. The training grounds were silent except for the occasional thud of distant rifle fire and the murmur of soldiers taking careful aim. Lieutenant Rachel Lawson had set up her position, her Barrett .50 carefully placed on the bipod, scope aligned perfectly with the distant target. While the other soldiers adjusted nervously, Rachel exuded calm. Her hands moved with practiced precision, checking the rifle, adjusting the scope, and running through mental calculations that would seem impossible to anyone watching. Wind, humidity, the angle of the shot, even the subtle sway of the earth, it all had to be considered for such extreme distances. Around her, the other SEALs were busy with their own rifles. They adjusted scopes, murmured measurements to each other, and tried to anticipate what the course of fire would demand. Many of them had trained for years in extreme sniper scenarios, yet there was a subtle tension in their movements. For most, the distance to the target was intimidating, nearly impossible to gauge with perfect accuracy. Rachel, however, appeared to move through an invisible rhythm, her mind calculating trajectories and variables almost effortlessly. It was as if she had done this 1,000 times before, though none of the soldiers around her knew her history. Commander Harris observed quietly from a distance, his eyes narrowing as he watched her work. He had seen extraordinary snipers in his career, yet something about Rachel stood out. It wasn't just skill. It was patience, focus, and an almost meditative control over her emotions. She didn't flinch, she didn't rush, and she didn't hesitate. Every tiny adjustment she made seemed to bring her closer to an invisible alignment that only she could perceive. Harris could sense that the other soldiers were beginning to take notice too. Murmurs of skepticism had given way to quiet fascination. Finally, Rachel steadied herself behind the rifle, her finger gently resting on the trigger. Her breathing slowed, her eyes narrowed slightly, and she exhaled softly. The other soldiers could feel the tension building. The wind shifted, and the dust in the training grounds swirled slightly, yet she didn't flinch. The target was far beyond what many of the soldiers thought possible. They had trained for long-range shots, but nothing at this scale. Rachel's calm presence seemed almost unreal in comparison to the nervous energy surrounding her. She squeezed the trigger. The Barrett .50 roared, the massive recoil jolting slightly against her shoulders, but she held her position perfectly. Everyone held their breath, watching the distant impact zone. A small cloud of dust erupted as the bullet hit precisely in the center of the target. The SEALs exchanged shocked glances. They had all aimed carefully, adjusted for distance, wind, and elevation, but Rachel's shot was perfect. No hesitation, no error. Commander Harris's jaw tightened slightly. He had expected skill, yes, but this level of accuracy under these conditions was almost unbelievable. Rachel didn't celebrate or smile. She didn't even look around. She simply adjusted the scope again, recalibrated for the next shot, and prepared to fire once more. To her, hitting the target was routine. Precision wasn't about impressing others. It was about discipline, practice, and understanding the weapon as an extension of oneself. Every movement was deliberate, measured, and perfect. The other soldiers couldn't help but stare. Their whispers were now tinged with awe and disbelief. One by one, the other soldiers attempted their shots, some landing close to the target, others falling far short. Frustration and doubt crept into the air. Even the most experienced SEALs were struggling to match the conditions, but Rachel continued with the same calm focus. Each of her subsequent shots was as flawless as the first, hitting targets at distances that seemed impossible. There was no luck here, just skill, patience, and perfect execution. Commander Harris finally stepped closer, his eyes fixed on her. He could see the calculations running through her mind, the minute adjustments she made to the scope, and the subtle movements of her body as she absorbed the recoil and stayed perfectly aligned for each shot. He could feel the intensity of her focus, the way she controlled every variable, both physical and mental. He realized then that this young officer wasn't just competent. She was exceptional. Her presence and her precision were rewriting the standards of the exercise right before his eyes. The surrounding soldiers were now silent, watching her like spectators at a spectacle they could hardly comprehend. The junior soldiers, who had once doubted her, whispered to each other in disbelief. "How is she doing that?" one murmured. "I've trained for years, and I can't even hit half the distance she's managing," said another. Even the veterans, who had seen countless operations, were forced to acknowledge her skill. Rachel's performance was not only flawless, it was inspiring, intimidating, and humbling all at once. As the sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the training grounds, Rachel completed the series of extreme-range shots. The air around her seemed to shift. The once skeptical soldiers now approached her with quiet respect, nodding in acknowledgement of her talent. Commander Harris remained close, studying her movements carefully. He knew that this wasn't the end of her demonstration. There was more to her than even these shots revealed. She finally stood, cleaned the rifle briefly, and packed it away with the same care she had shown in the armory. No words were spoken, but the respect in the air was unmistakable. The SEALs had witnessed something extraordinary. Precision, patience, and skill combined at a level rarely seen. Commander Harris approached her, trying to hide his astonishment. "Lieutenant Lawson," he said, his voice measured but edged with admiration. "Your skill is remarkable. I've seen some of the best, but few can match what I've just witnessed." Rachel nodded calmly, her expression serene. For her, it was simply part of the job. discipline and focus were what allowed her to succeed where others struggled. By the end of the exercise, the mood among the soldiers had shifted entirely. Skepticism had been replaced with awe, doubt with admiration. Rachel Lawson had demonstrated not just accuracy, but an almost supernatural level of control and focus, leaving everyone, including Commander Harris, stunned. The base now knew one undeniable fact. This young officer was a force to be reckoned with, and her presence would change the way everyone approached the art of sniping. The field was quiet, the only sounds being the occasional wind and the distant echo of rifles being fired by other soldiers. Lieutenant Rachel Lawson knelt behind her Barrett .50 sniper rifle, the massive weapon feeling like an extension of her own body. The earlier exercises had been impressive, but today was different. Today, the challenge was to push the limits, the kind of extreme-range shot that even seasoned snipers considered almost impossible. Rachel had faced impossible distances before, but now she was doing it under the watchful eyes of the SEALs and Commander Harris. The other soldiers had finished their rounds, some hitting targets that were already considered difficult, while others struggled with the sheer scale of the distance. Whispers of amazement filled the air as they watched Rachel methodically prepare for her next shot. She didn't rush. She didn't look around to see if anyone was watching. Every motion was deliberate, controlled, and precise. Adjusting the scope, measuring the wind, calculating trajectory, and accounting for every variable, she prepared to make history. Commander Harris stood a short distance away, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowing. He had seen excellent snipers before, some of whom had achieved incredible records. But there was something about Rachel that he couldn't quite put into words. Her calm focus, her unwavering precision, and the confidence she exuded without arrogance all pointed to one undeniable truth. She was extraordinary. Harris had learned to trust his instincts over decades of service, and every fiber of his being told him that the shot she was about to make would be remarkable. Rachel exhaled slowly, her finger gently resting on the trigger. The target lay over 3,300 meters away, a distance that would challenge even the most experienced snipers. Most of the soldiers around her could barely see it with the naked eye, and even with high-powered scopes, judging such distances accurately was nearly impossible. Yet Rachel approached it with complete focus. She wasn't thinking about impressing anyone, nor was she concerned with proving herself. To her, this was simply another calculation, another test of her skill and patience. She steadied herself, adjusting the rifle slightly, aligning her breathing with her mental calculations. Her calmness was almost hypnotic, and even the nearby soldiers, who had begun to doubt her earlier, were now completely silent, watching in awe. Every adjustment she made was based on precise knowledge, honed through countless hours of practice and missions that no one at the base had seen. For Rachel, there was no room for error. Every detail mattered. Then she fired. The sound of the Barrett .50 echoed across the base, a deep, resonant boom that made the ground tremble slightly. All eyes followed the trajectory of the bullet, tracking it as it sped across the distance. The moment of anticipation stretched, the soldiers holding their breath. And then the impact. The bullet hit the target perfectly dead center at a distance that few could believe. There was a stunned silence. Some of the soldiers froze, unable to speak, while others whispered in disbelief. Commander Harris's eyes widened. He had expected a great shot, perhaps even an excellent one, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. The precision, the control, and the sheer distance of the hit made it almost unbelievable. He took a step forward, his mind racing to process what he had just witnessed. Rachel Lawson, this quiet, disciplined officer who had barely spoken a word all morning, had just achieved a feat that would make most snipers shake their heads in disbelief. Rachel didn't react. She didn't smile or celebrate. To her, hitting the target was the expected outcome of preparation, skill, and discipline. She adjusted her scope, checked the rifle, and prepared for the next shot. Every move she made reinforced the fact that this was not luck. This was mastery. The surrounding soldiers, who had doubted her earlier, now stared in awe. Some of the veterans nodded quietly, a gesture of acknowledgement that was far more meaningful than words. Even the junior recruits, who had been whispering nervously before, now watched her with wide eyes, silently taking mental notes. Commander Harris finally approached her, his steps measured, his expression a mix of awe and respect. "Lieutenant Lawson," he said, his voice calm but tinged with disbelief. "That was extraordinary. I've never seen a shot like that at this distance. How do you do it?" Rachel met his gaze calmly, offering only a small nod. "Training, sir. Focus. Discipline. It's all about preparation and understanding every variable," she replied simply, her tone neutral but confident. The SEALs around them began to murmur, some quietly asking questions, others expressing admiration. Rachel had done more than just hit a distant target. She had shattered expectations, challenged assumptions, and proven that precision, patience, and focus could achieve what most considered impossible. Commander Harris could feel the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't just another training exercise. It was a demonstration of skill that would be remembered long after the day was over. As Rachel packed her Barrett .50 carefully, she remained calm and composed. There was no showmanship, no attempt to draw attention to herself. She had done her job, and she had done it flawlessly. The soldiers around her, however, were changed. Their skepticism had been replaced by respect, their doubt by admiration. Lieutenant Rachel Lawson had not only stunned the SEALs. She had made them witnesses to a level of skill that few would ever experience firsthand. The day ended with a quiet acknowledgement from Commander Harris. He shook his head slightly, still processing what he had seen. "This young officer," he thought, "has the potential to achieve feats none of us could imagine." Rachel, for her part, left the field with the same calm demeanor she had arrived with, unaware of the impact she had just made. She had proven her skill, not through words or ego, but through action, the silent, undeniable action of mastery. After the astonishing exercise on the training grounds, the atmosphere around the SEAL base had shifted. Soldiers who had been skeptical or dismissive now moved with cautious respect when Rachel Lawson passed by. Even the most experienced SEALs whispered among themselves, trying to understand how a young officer could demonstrate such unmatched precision and control. Commander Harris, however, was the only one who seemed determined to uncover the full story. He had watched her work with a critical eye, impressed yet unsettled by her calm confidence and flawless execution. There was a sense that what he had witnessed was only a glimpse of her true capabilities. Later that evening, after the day's exercises had concluded, Harris approached Rachel quietly in the armory. She was cleaning her Barrett .50 again, moving her hands over the rifle with the same precise, deliberate motions she had displayed since her arrival. Harris leaned against a nearby rack, watching her for a moment before speaking. "Lieutenant, you've made an incredible impression today. But I need to know, how did you develop such skill? Not many snipers can hit a target at that distance with such consistency." Rachel looked up briefly, her expression calm, almost serene. She didn't hesitate. "Sir," she said softly, "I've been trained for extreme conditions and specialized missions. Most of it is classified, but I can say that I've spent years mastering the rifle, studying every possible variable, and learning to stay calm under any pressure." The words were simple, but the implication was enormous. Harris's eyebrows raised slightly. He had served with some of the finest snipers in the military, men and women who had years of experience and countless successful operations behind them. And yet, here was Rachel, young but commanding a level of expertise that rivaled, and perhaps even surpassed, many of them. Her calm, disciplined approach made sense now. What he had thought was exceptional natural talent was backed by rigorous training, mental discipline, and real-world experience. Rachel continued, her voice steady and even. "It's not just about hitting the target, sir. Every shot requires calculations for wind, distance, humidity, temperature, and even the curvature of the earth. I've had to do this under extreme conditions, sometimes with nothing more than instinct and practice. The rifle isn't just a weapon. It's an extension of myself. When I understand it completely, I can anticipate every variable before it even affects the shot." Harris listened carefully, realizing that her description matched perfectly what he had observed on the training field. This was no exaggeration. Every movement, every adjustment, every second of patience had contributed to the results he had just witnessed. He couldn't help but probe further. "And these missions you mention?" he asked cautiously, aware that some classified operations might be sensitive even in conversation. Rachel nodded, understanding the unspoken limits of what she could reveal. "I've participated in missions overseas that required extreme discretion. Many details are classified, but I can say they tested my endurance, focus, and ability to perform under life-or-death pressure. Every skill I've demonstrated here today comes from those experiences, as well as countless hours of training and preparation." The revelation left Harris in silent awe. He had been impressed by her skill, but now he understood its source. Rachel Lawson was not just naturally talented. She had honed her abilities through relentless practice, real combat experience, and mental discipline few could even imagine. This explained the quiet confidence she displayed. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone because she had already survived the kind of challenges most soldiers never encountered. Around them, other soldiers had begun to notice the subtle shift in Harris's demeanor. They could see that his skepticism had turned to respect, and now curiosity. Whispers grew as some approached, trying to glean what they could about Rachel's past. She didn't flaunt her accomplishments. She spoke with calm authority, but only as much as necessary to convey her experience. Her humility was striking. She had achieved so much yet carried herself without arrogance, letting her skill speak for itself. Harris continued observing her, noting how even in casual movements, cleaning her rifle, organizing her gear, or adjusting her equipment, Rachel displayed discipline and precision. It wasn't just on the firing line that she excelled. It was in every action she took. He realized then that this level of consistency was rare. Many soldiers could perform well in controlled exercises, but few could maintain such excellence under pressure with extreme focus and in ways that seemed effortless. Rachel did it naturally, a result of experience and mental preparation combined. By the end of the evening, Harris had formed a deep respect for Rachel Lawson. She had not only demonstrated unmatched skill on the training field but also revealed the foundation of her abilities. Real-world experience, rigorous training, and a mindset cultivated for peak performance. He knew that this was just the beginning. Rachel's presence would not only challenge the expectations of the SEALs, but also inspire them to push beyond their own limits. Rachel packed away her Barrett carefully, placing it in its secure case. Her movements were precise, deliberate, and methodical, the same care she had taken when cleaning it earlier. As she stood, Harris addressed her once more. "Lieutenant, it's clear now why you're capable of what you are. Your record, your discipline, and your experience speak for themselves. I think it's safe to say that everyone here has a lot to learn from you." Rachel simply nodded, her calm demeanor unchanged. For her, this was not about recognition. It was about mastery, discipline, and being prepared for the challenges ahead. The soldiers left the armory that night with a new understanding. Rachel Lawson was not just an exceptional sniper. She was a master of her craft, a disciplined professional, and someone whose abilities had been forged in the toughest environments imaginable. Commander Harris knew that her skills would soon be tested in ways that went beyond training, but he also knew one thing for certain. Rachel was ready for anything. The days following the extreme range exercise passed quickly at the SEAL base, but the impression Lieutenant Rachel Lawson had left on everyone remained. Her calm precision, her flawless skill with the Barrett .50, and her quiet authority had shifted the energy among the soldiers. Skepticism had disappeared, replaced by curiosity and respect. Whispers of admiration could be heard in barracks and on the training grounds, and even the veterans, who rarely acknowledged newcomers, were now paying attention to her methods. Commander Harris noticed the subtle change immediately. Soldiers who had once doubted Rachel were now approaching her, seeking advice or simply watching as she prepared for her next round of training. Some of the younger recruits lingered longer than necessary, hoping to catch even a glimpse of her techniques, while a few of the more experienced SEALs exchanged nods that seemed to say, "She's the real deal." Harris realized that Rachel's influence on the base was growing quickly, but it wasn't forced. She didn't demand attention or try to assert authority. Instead, her presence alone, combined with the undeniable results of her skill, earned her respect organically. Rachel continued to train with the same dedication and focus she had always displayed. Every morning, she polished her Barrett .50, checked every component, and ran through her mental calculations for accuracy and precision. Her methods were meticulous, almost ritualistic, and her discipline inspired the soldiers around her. Some tried to imitate her approach, taking extra care with their own rifles and slowing down to observe variables they had previously overlooked. Rachel didn't intervene or instruct them directly, yet her influence was unmistakable. She led not through words but through example, and that made her all the more respected. One day, during a particularly challenging training session, a group of soldiers was struggling to hit targets at extreme distances. Their frustration was growing, and a few were on the verge of giving up. Rachel quietly stepped over, her movements calm and deliberate. Without making a show of it, she suggested subtle adjustments, how to align the scope more accurately, how to account for the wind, how to stabilize the rifle against the slight movements of the body. She didn't give long lectures or boast about her own skills. Instead, she demonstrated the technique, letting her actions teach more effectively than words ever could. The results were immediate. Shots that had previously missed began to land with surprising accuracy. The soldiers were amazed, not only by the improvement in their results but also by the clarity and simplicity of her guidance. They realized that Rachel's mastery was not just a personal achievement. It was something she could share, a skill that could elevate the entire team. Commander Harris watched from a distance, a faint smile on his face. This was what he had hoped for when he first observed her. Someone who could inspire and elevate those around her, without ego or arrogance getting in the way. As the days went on, Rachel's reputation at the base solidified. Soldiers began to trust her instincts, often seeking her input before attempting difficult shots or navigating complex scenarios. Even during competitive exercises, she remained calm, never showing frustration when others struggled and never seeking praise for her own success. Her humility, combined with her unmatched skill, made her a natural leader. Respect was given freely, not demanded, and the SEALs responded to that authenticity. Commander Harris finally took the time to speak with her privately, away from the others. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice steady but filled with a sense of acknowledgement. "What you've done here is remarkable. You've earned respect not through words or position, but through skill, patience, and discipline. The other soldiers are noticing, and more importantly, they're learning. You've changed the way this base operates." Rachel nodded slightly, her calm demeanor unwavering. "Sir," she replied, "I'm just focused on doing my job. If others learn from it, that's a bonus. My priority is precision and preparation. Everything else comes from that." Harris couldn't help but admire her mindset. Many soldiers with her skill level would have sought recognition, accolades, or authority. Rachel, however, operated differently. She didn't need validation because her confidence was built on real mastery. Her quiet leadership was more powerful than any command. It inspired those around her to perform at their best. The SEALs began to see her as someone they could rely on in any situation, someone whose skill and composure could tip the balance in critical missions. As training continued, Rachel's influence extended beyond sniper exercises. She began to mentor other soldiers informally, offering tips on focus, discipline, and patience. She emphasized mental preparation as much as technical skill, teaching that confidence came from preparation rather than luck. Soldiers started arriving early to watch her routines, replicating her methods, and striving for the same calm precision. The culture of the base subtly shifted. What had once been a place of quiet routines and standard drills became an environment where focus, patience, and meticulous preparation were valued and respected above all else. By the end of the week, the transformation was clear. Rachel Lawson was no longer just a remarkable sniper. She had become a role model, a source of guidance, and a quiet leader who commanded respect through action rather than words. The SEALs, who had initially doubted her abilities, now looked to her as a standard of excellence. Commander Harris felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had witnessed not just skill but influence, the rare combination of talent and humility that inspired others to rise to their potential. For Rachel, none of this was about recognition or praise. She remained focused on her training, on perfecting her craft, and on preparing for the challenges ahead. Yet, through her dedication and example, she had achieved something remarkable. She had earned the respect and trust of the SEALs, not because of who she was, but because of what she could do and how she carried herself. The seeds of admiration and influence had been planted, and they would continue to grow, shaping the culture and performance of the base for years to come. The final day of the training exercises arrived, and the atmosphere at the SEAL base was electric. Soldiers moved with a quiet anticipation, knowing that today would push them to their limits. Lieutenant Rachel Lawson had already earned respect through her unmatched skill, calm focus, and quiet leadership. But today was different. Today, she would demonstrate the full extent of her abilities, the culmination of years of preparation, discipline, and experience. Every eye on the training grounds turned toward her, curiosity mixed with a hint of nervousness. Even Commander Harris felt a rare thrill of anticipation. Rachel approached her Barrett .50 sniper rifle with the same calm, deliberate movements she had shown since her arrival. She meticulously checked every part, aligned the scope, and ran through her mental calculations. The air around her seemed to quiet, as if even the base itself was holding its breath. The target today was farther than anything attempted in previous exercises, 3,347 meters, a distance that most snipers could only dream of. Few believed it could be hit under these conditions, but Rachel's calm demeanor betrayed no doubt. She knew that her skill and preparation would make the impossible possible. The other soldiers watched her with a mix of awe and tension. They had seen her hit extreme distances before, but this was different. Rachel didn't rush. She didn't glance at the reactions of others. Every movement, every adjustment was purposeful. She accounted for wind, temperature, air pressure, and the slight movements of the rifle's bipod. Her breathing synchronized with her mental calculations, steady and precise. To the untrained eye, it seemed like an almost meditative process, a quiet ritual that prepared her body and mind to act as one. Commander Harris leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on her. He had served with the best snipers in the world, yet he had never seen this level of calm and precision combined. He could feel the anticipation in the air. The other soldiers, too, were silent now, their previous doubts erased by the weight of what they were about to witness. Rachel's presence commanded respect not through words, but through the sheer certainty of her skill. Finally, she exhaled slowly, placed her finger gently on the trigger, and squeezed. The powerful recoil of the Barrett .50 jolted slightly against her shoulders, but she remained perfectly aligned. Every soldier on the field held their breath, eyes tracking the flight of the bullet across the immense distance. Time seemed to stretch as they waited for the result. And then the impact. The bullet hit the target perfectly dead center, at a distance that had previously been considered nearly impossible. A stunned silence fell over the base. Soldiers stared in disbelief, some unable to move or speak. Commander Harris's jaw tightened as he processed what he had just seen. Rachel Lawson had achieved what no one thought possible. The precision, focus, and calm required for such a shot were extraordinary, but she had executed it flawlessly. It wasn't luck, it was mastery. Every adjustment, every calculation, every moment of patience had led to this one perfect outcome. Rachel didn't react outwardly. She didn't celebrate, smile, or seek acknowledgement. To her, the shot was simply the result of discipline and preparation. But for those watching, it was a revelation. Whispers of admiration spread among the soldiers, some shaking their heads in disbelief. "How is that even possible?" one veteran muttered. "She's not just skilled. She's on another level," said another. Even the most experienced SEALs, who had trained for years with elite snipers, were forced to acknowledge the extraordinary feat they had just witnessed. Commander Harris finally stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice calm but carrying a deep note of awe. "That was extraordinary. I've seen some of the best, but few could do what you just did. Your skill, your focus, It's unparalleled. Rachel nodded slightly, her calm demeanor unchanged. Thank you, sir, she replied simply. It's all about preparation and focus. The rifle, the environment, every detail matters. That's how precision is achieved. The soldiers surrounding them now approached, some quietly congratulating her, others just observing in silent respect. Rachel's achievement had done more than prove her skill. It had inspired everyone on the base. Even the most skeptical recruits now looked at her with admiration, recognizing that discipline, patience, and mental focus could achieve results far beyond what they had imagined. Her presence and skill had become a standard, something to aspire to, a quiet benchmark of excellence that motivated everyone around her. By the end of the day, Rachel's record-breaking shot was more than a personal triumph. It was a moment that redefined expectations at the SEAL base. She had demonstrated the extraordinary power of preparation, mental discipline, and mastery over one's craft. The soldiers now understood that skill alone was not enough. It required focus, patience, and a calm mind. Rachel had embodied all of these qualities perfectly. Commander Harris watched her one last time as she packed away her rifle. He felt a deep sense of respect and admiration, knowing that she had not only demonstrated exceptional skill, but had also elevated the entire team. Rachel Lawson had proven herself beyond any doubt. Her 3,347-meter shot would be remembered at the base for years, a symbol of what discipline, preparation, and talent could achieve. As Rachel walked away from the training grounds, calm and composed as ever, the soldiers and officers around her carried a new understanding. She had shown them the true meaning of excellence. She had earned not just their respect, but their inspiration. And while she remained humble, quiet, and focused on her craft, her legacy at the SEAL base was now firmly established, one of unparalleled skill, disciplined preparation, and the quiet power of a soldier who had mastered her art.